And we are live. Welcome, mystery and thriller fans. I'm your on-air host, Sara DiVello, and I am so excited to welcome tonight spy-tastic writer extraordinaire Dan Fesperman, here to give us the inside scoop on his brand new red-hot book, Winter Work. Dan, welcome to Mystery and Thriller Mavens. Tell us about this book.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Sara. It's always great to talk with a fellow writer as well. So it's great to be here and with someone as talented as you. So, Winter Work is set in the chaotic months after the fall of the Berlin Wall, when things were changing rapidly, especially for my main character, who was high up in the Stasi Foreign Intelligence branch. I think most Americans know the Stasi as the organization that snooped on its own people. But this fellow was on the other side. He was a spy and a spy master. And he's kind of worried because there's been talk of West Germany prosecuting these people who had pretty much outwitted them for years in the spy field. And he has a disabled wife. And so they have moved up to their little dacha, their little country house on a little lake north of Berlin up in the woods. And he's really kind of pondering what he's going to do with his life. His whole purpose has kind of been pulled out from under him. He can't even go back into the office to clean out his desk because that's all been padlocked. He's about to get his last paycheck. And his whole world is just changed almost overnight. So that's how the book begins. And then he comes across a murdered colleague who was living up in the same area as him.
Now, the murdered colleague is staged to look like a suicide, but our hero is not fooled. So, oh my gosh, Dan, we have so much to talk about, and I can't wait to get into every bit of it. But first, I just want to welcome everyone. So we're streaming live to 6 destinations across Facebook and YouTube. So no matter where you're watching from, this is the right place. This is the right time, and it is Mystery Monday. And because Mondays can be murder, we're here to make it a little less painful. If you have any questions for Dan about Winter Work, about his time in Germany as a foreign correspondent for the Baltimore Sun, his research process into the Stasi, into spies, I need to know. Just get those questions going in the comments, and I will get them right over to Dan. I want to welcome Sybil, welcome Patricia Ann, welcome Kim, welcome Anne. So great to have everybody. And that's just on the bookstore site. So any questions for Dan? Let's get them going. Dan, I'm going to kick off because I am dying to know. You were in Germany. You were on the ground in Germany. Did you know people from the Stasi? What was your research process like? I know nothing about the Stasi.
The first time I came up against anything to do with the Stasi was while I was there. I was in Berlin from 93 to 96. So this was about 3 years after the events in this book take place. And it was about a little more than 3 years after reunification happened. And at that time, the big focus was opening up the records that the Stasi had kept on its own people. And they were just starting to do that. And people were going in and reading these, seeing the files on themselves. And there were all of these horror stories about which I wrote quite a few stories of people finding out that their school teacher had informed them, or their boss, or their coworkers, or their wives, or their husbands, or their sons or daughters, their clergymen. All kinds of terrible things were coming out about how people had informed on each other. I got interested in this aspect that's in my book, the foreign intelligence side, a little later. And I've talked to people who worked in that field. I've talked to people who sort of done a lot of studies of what became of all these people, these former spies, how they tried to sort of blend into the woodwork, and what became of all the files that they kept, which were a lot more secretive, really. They were not opened up. They tried to shred them about who their agents were, what was compiled about NATO, about West Germany, about their partnership with the Russians and the KGB. All of that, they tried to destroy as much of it as they could. But all of it, eventually, there was this competition by the CIA, by other Western intelligence, by the KGB, to either put it into safekeeping or to obtain copies of it, to find out where all of these agents were, who suddenly were cut off and without an employer. So.
I mean, my brain is scrambling to try to input all of this information. I mean, neighbors, even people from the church snitching on each other, secret files being destroyed. I mean, Dan, this is too crazy to make up. Wow. So did you, and then the idea of of former Stasi agents, Emil, trying to have a life after Stasi. I mean, that's a weird thing too, to go from to try to think about imagining yourself as a spy and then, what do I want to do with my next chapter? Very bizarre. So did you get the chance to sit down with any real ex-Stasi agents, or?
I did not, because the one I would have most wanted to talk to, Marcus Wolf, he was sort of their chief spy master. He passed away back in the early 2000s. He published a memoir, and it's quite revealing, but it also sort of hides a lot of things, and he tries to gloss over some of the excesses that they went to. But I had fun. I talked to people who have met him, who talked to him. I modeled my character after some people who worked closely with him, who have also passed away. But a lot of these people were older then and have since moved on or are just not available. They don't want to talk about it anymore.
Right. Exactly. It seems like if you have that kind of high stress job, shall we say,
Yes.
you might want to just move on. Oh my gosh, absolutely crazy. So Dan, your book is your 13th novel of spycraft.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that. And the Wall Street Journal says it does not disappoint. So let's talk about that. I'm going to pop that up on the screen. When one has written 13 well-received books, is the pressure to produce a 14th one, is it motivating? Is it paralyzing? What's that like for you from a craft perspective?
I enjoy it so much that I don't feel pressure from it. And on this book, in fact, I felt all along that it was the best book I've written yet. And I'm not one of those authors who habitually says, oh, whatever I've written recently is the book I'm closest to, therefore that's the best thing I've written. I don't always feel that way, but this time I felt firmly that way, mostly because while I was writing it, I really enjoyed the company of the characters. I enjoyed their interactions. There was a strange chemistry that developed between the main character, an East German spy, and the main American character, a woman working for the CIA. Not romantic, but it was this odd chemistry because she realized that they both had some certain things in common about wanting to hide certain things, about wanting to bring certain things out in the open. They both feared the same people. So I really enjoyed writing it, and I felt like that the dialogue, I was almost taking dictation at times. So when you get into that kind of a zone when you're writing a book, you're just very excited when it's finally time to publish it.
Yes, I am always fascinated by this, and I often ask my guests, what is it like for you to be in that state of, some people say flow, to be in that
Yeah.
state of where you don't even feel like maybe you're creating this, you're just
Yeah.
channeling it, or it's being dictated to you, and your little fingers can, as fast as they can fly over the keyboard, you're writing
Yeah.
down the dialogue, you're writing down the scene. Why do you think this one was different, or have you had that experience in the past?
I think part of it was the closeness I feel with Berlin because I'd lived there for 3 years. So I didn't feel like I had to strain to capture the feel of the city and where they were. So that kind of took care of itself. I'd written Claire Saylor, the main American character, in 2 previous novels. So I was already comfortable with her. And when I started writing Emil Grimm, the main East German character, even though he's part of this horrible machinery of the East German state, he became very comfortable for me right away. So I think it was just a matter of getting comfortable very quickly with the characters.
Oh,
I'm not really sure why it worked out that way, but I sort of felt a closeness to them. So.
I love that. And I just realized in my head, I've been pronouncing his name wrong because I've been thinking of him as Emil, and it's not that.
Yeah, the proper German pronunciation would probably be Emil, but it would be that first accent on the first syllable. But yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, Dan, the Wall Street Journal is not the only one raving. The Christian Science Monitor named this one of the 10 best books of July. Congratulations on that.
Thanks.
Raving a well-crafted examination of truth, honor and loyalty in a shifting world. Let's talk about that. Did you sit down when you sat down to start writing, or when you immerse yourself in this world of post-wall falling Berlin, were you thinking, I would like to write a well-crafted examination of truth, honor, and loyalty? Or what were you trying to communicate in this book? Or maybe it just, because you did feel like you were taking dictation, the story had another goal in mind. Tell us about that.
Well, I mean, it is a lot about loyalty and what are you loyal to? This fellow Emil had dedicated all of his career to the state, even as he had realized toward the end of his career that the state was not living up to its ideals. The slogans were empty. He was kind of embarrassed for what they were doing, especially within his own country. And he was not proud of it. And as many people, I think, near the top of that side of the Stasi also felt, including Marcus Wolf, the spy master. And so I think what I'm gone off the track here. And tell me the last part of that question again.
So, the Christian Science is talking about your examination of truth, honor, and loyalty. Is that what you were trying to write? You wanted to examine loyalty. You wanted to examine truth. You wanted to examine, honor, or did this just, did Emil tell you that's what he wanted to do as you were dictating? What did you set out to do?
It was a little of both, but I wanted to look at what does happen when the thing you've been working for your whole life is suddenly pulled literally overnight. It suddenly ceased to exist. And how do you deal with that? How do you reconcile what you've been doing for the past 30 years? And how do you plan on a life moving forward? And what does it make you think about? So I didn't set out so much to write an examination of that, but I think that comes through in the prose and in the dialogue, because inevitably that's what all these characters are confronting in their lives.
I loved that. Excuse me. I loved that because it's so meaningful and it's so universal. As we curate an intentional life and we align ourselves with different beliefs or different political parties or different, systems of living, you can get to the point where you're like, does this still resonate? Does this still feel aligned? And I love that you addressed that in this book. So very cool that you did that. And I just want to share a few more of these amazing reviews because, Dan, there's so many. I mean, this book is just racking up incredible praise, starred reviews from Kirkus and Publishers Weekly and Booklist. I mean, amazing. Yeah. Kirkus raving an engrossing, deep in the weeds thriller. Publishers Weekly calling it superb. I'm going to pop those up as well. So Dan, what have you learned over the course of writing 13 books? How does one write an engrossing, superb, deep in the weeds thriller? How do you do that? Are you a plotter? Are you a pantser? How many revisions does it take you? Give us a glimpse into the process of Dan Fesperman.
Well, it's odd because it's a little bit different with every book. With some books, I do a lot of outlining. With some books, I know where I'm starting, but not where I'm ending. With some books, I feel like the whole plot kind of opens up for me right away and I know where it's going to go. With this book, I did not. With this book, I knew my biggest question in writing this book was I knew that Emil had something in his past. And I wrote this scene about this episode in his past where he had kind of, in his own eyes, disgraced himself and used the tools of the state to his own personal advantage in a way that shamed him. I wrote that scene very early, but I had it lodged in my head and I didn't know where it was going to go. And so I'm writing, I'm getting deeper and deeper into the book. And I'm thinking, where am I going to reveal this? How am I going to reveal this? And then a moment, and anyone who reads this book will realize that moment, a moment presented itself almost serendipitously where he was in this place, this area of the country that was already, even in the chaos of these months right after the wall came down, was already feeling like haunted ground in terms of this was the heart of the worst of the regime. This is where the seat of power was. And now it's dark and it's calm and he's alone with his thoughts for 5-6 hours. And of course, this would be where it comes back to kind of prey on him. And it was the perfect moment to kind of for him to flash back and sort of in a half waking, half dreaming moment. So it was serendipitous in that way. So that was my main plot problem that I had to solve along the way. And fortunately, it had it had sort of a natural solution.
Ooh, interesting. I'm also interested when you said that sometimes you spend, some books in your
Yeah.
13 book career, you have spent a lot of time plotting, and others not at all, which is so interesting because I haven't ever interviewed anybody who has such a different process per book. It's usually like the creative process seems to be kind of their creative process from book to book. And I'm fascinated that you flow creatively from, your process differentiates from book to book. I
Mhm.
think that's really cool. So do you have, let's talk a little more about your creative process. Do you sit down every day at 6 a.m. and you're not getting up until you get 1,000 words down? Do you just write when the spirit moves you? I mean, what's Dan's writing life like? Or
I
writing
am a better morning worker, but not at 6 a.m. That was when my first three books that I wrote. I was still a reporter with the Baltimore Sun, and I was getting up at 5:45. I'd be writing by 6. I'd be done by 9. I'd be at my day job by 9:30, and by the end of the day, Friday, I was thoroughly cooked. But since I've been doing this full time, which is since about 2005, um, I as I said, I'm more of a morning worker, but in the beginning of a book, progress is so slow because I'm so worried about character. Who is this person? Who are these people? How do they get along? How do they see the world? Where are they going from here? And I'm thinking about structure, and I'm thinking about how they're going to end up. And I write, it takes me probably about 6 months to write the first one quarter of the book, and about 6 more months, maybe 4 to 6 months to write the last three quarters of the book. And the deeper I get into the book, the faster I go, the more comfortable I am. So by the time I'm about halfway through, it's the last thing I'm thinking about when I go to sleep. I probably circulate a lot of thoughts about it while I'm sleeping. I get up, I already have phrases in my head, and the writing goes very intensely. And these are like 6 hours of writing a day by then, which for me is a lot because I'm just worn out at the end of that. But so it's this process that speeds up and grows more intense the deeper I get into it with every book.
Do you think that it takes you 6 months to write the first? I'm interested to hear that it takes you 6 months to write the first 25% of the book, and then 6 months to write the
Yeah,
second three quarters of the book. Is
yeah,
that because you do by then you're like, I know Emil, I know his
yeah.
heart, I know his pain points. Like this is clicking along.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of like it's like getting to know anyone. Like getting to know your
Ooh.
friends. You're much easier with them and their company. They're much more predictable for you. You don't have to stop and ponder how would they react to this. You just know instinctively by then and what they would say. And when something does ring false and you look at it again in the afternoon as you're doing rewriting, it sticks out to you right away.
I love that, and I love the idea, what you said that it's like getting to know friends because that's something we can all relate to, and
Yeah.
it's nice to think of you thinking of your characters as your friends.
Yeah, with all their faults and flaws, and sometimes you're angry with them, and sometimes you're tolerant of them, and sometimes they're just a lot of fun. So it depends on what they're doing right then.
I love that. I love that. So in my Mystery and Thriller Mavens Facebook group, not everyone can watch live with us because some people are, doing or at work or putting kids to bed or having dinner or whatever. So I let people submit questions in advance, and
Okay.
someone submitted the question: do you feel that your characters talk to you? Which it seems like you do, and if so, have you ever had to change something because of what they told you?
Wow, that's a great question. I'm trying to think. Yeah, in this book, the character that changed the most is a woman who's involved with Emil. She's the caretaker for his wife and his wife's best friend, and they have this odd three-way relationship that all of them are in on, and all of them agree. But in the beginning, I really did not have that big of a role for her. And about halfway through the book, she kind of tapped me on the shoulder one day and says, "I've got a lot more to offer here." And I realized that was true. I expanded her role. I started thinking more about her past and what position that would have put her in to do later in the book. So she kind of have talked her way into a bigger and more important role, and I think that worked out better for Emil as well. So anyway.
Did you resist the shoulder tapping? Were you like, no, no, you're a minor
No, no,
character?
no, because it felt like the right thing to do from the moment it sort of occurred to me because of in thinking about her.
I love that. How cool is that? Were you at your desk typing when she tapped you, or were you, like at the dinner table or having a shower? Like,
Yeah, I was working on a scene with her in it, and where her and Emil meet in sort of an unlikely place. And I started thinking, well, why would she have come out there and under these
oh,
circumstances? And what would have motivated her to do that? Well, of course, because of such and such in her past, and that makes her much more likely to be able to work with him on this. So.
oh, I love that. I love that. They seem so real to you, and
Yeah, they do.
therefore to us.
Yeah.
Um, Dan, Booklist also awarding you a starred review. Let's pop that up just quickly because it's a big one. The story leads to an exciting conclusion, a thoroughly surprising spin on the typical Spies on the Run finale. Let's pause there. So since
Yeah.
this book was dictated to you, did the ending surprise you, Dan, or did you have to rewrite it, or were you clear on it the whole time? Walk us through that.
The ending, I had this vague idea all along of how I wanted to end, but the mechanics of it were they seemed too difficult. I didn't even want to think about them the whole way because I just would have worried about it. So when I got to the end, I had to stop and kind of catch my breath and figure out who was coming from where and who would arrive at what point. So it was a lot of heavy lifting at that point. But after that, sort of the ending after the climax. I hadn't really thought about that, but that it was very sort of a sweet little scene at the very end with Emil and Carola, and that ended up being quite easy to write because that did sort of come to me naturally once the climax was passed. So.
Very cool. Well, I like to hear the backstory on that. Again, coming from that starred review from Booklist about that ending. And we have a few minutes left. I just want to get to a few more of these amazing words of praise. Mark Greaney, the number one New York Times bestselling author of the Sierra Six, said Dan Fesperman is one of my favorite thriller writers, and winter work is a brilliant addition to his magnificent oeuvre. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Intelligently written and plotted. Little does he know, Dan, that you did not plot this. You fooled Mark Greaney. Well done. Based on fact, as gripping as any fiction, and only improved by Fesperman's deft writing. So let's talk about your deft writing. One thing that I noticed, and I don't read a lot of poetry. In fact, I don't read any poetry, but I felt like your writing had poetic influences in the way one line I underlined, even from the first pages, when you're describing winter and how the trees are barren and everything is bare. And you said hill and vale are revealed through disrobing trees, mud and bone arising from dying weeds. It was so beautifully written, Dan.
Well, thank you.
It feels poetic. And I noticed that throughout. You established that from the first page, but then I noticed it throughout. Do you consider yourself a poetic writer? Let's talk about that, the pace and the rhythm and your beautiful prose.
I don't know if I consider myself a poetic writer, but and also I'd like to say thank you to Mark again for that wonderful quote. And one of the great things about doing this is the generosity and help of other writers. It's such a great community of writers. But I think what I am attracted to is if there is any rhythm and poetry in the writing, it's because that's what I'm attracted to as a reader. To me, what sets a book apart among of other books is not just wonderful characters and great plot, but it's the rhythm of the language. And when I can fall in love with the language of a writer, it almost doesn't matter what they're writing about. They can tell me any kind of story and I will follow it because it's so beautiful to read. So if some of that comes out in my own writing, great, because that's the kind of thing that attracts me as a reader.
Oh, I love that. Well, that's actually a perfect segue because I did have a few more questions submitted in advance. Mary would like to know, Dan, what writers do you admire? Who do you read? So what a perfect segue. Let's chat about that.
Oh, God, there's so many. I could talk about what I've read recently. I just read Aaron Flanagan's book, Deer Season, which I think won the Edgar for Best First Novel. That is a beautifully written book. Really quite
Yes.
liked that. I love Mick Herron and his Slow House series. They're just so witty, and the writing is razor sharp there. Those are wonderful books. And of course, I'm a huge fan of John le Carré, the late John le Carré, and one of my prized possessions is a true first edition of The Spy Who Came In from the Cold, a little volume that I actually was able to get him to sign years later. And yeah,
Wow.
and I always kind of cringe when people compare anyone, me included, to Le Carré, because there is only one like Le Carré, and there will never be another one. But anyway, those are just a few. But I feel like I have a different favorite every few months, and I'm always looking for new writers. I know Razorblade Tears that came out this year.
Yeah.
That was a wonderful book and a great new voice. There's so many great new voices out in genre fiction and all of fiction these days that I just feel like you can't go wrong. It's just so much to explore these days, and it's just wonderful.
Yay. I loved Razorblade Tears.
Yeah, it was a fantastic novel.
Sean Cosby, S.A. Cosby, came on the
Yeah,
show when that came out in paperback in April. And what I loved about that book was how powerful and how
yeah,
painful and poignant it was. I mean, it hurt, but it
yeah,
in the best possible way to read the truth
yeah.
of
It's a
these
very raw
people.
and honest book, is what I love about it. The
Yes.
honesty is just really comes through. So
Yay. Margaret Pinard joining us from Portland saying yay for new voices.
yes,
Absolutely.
yes,
Exactly. And I think raw is the right word.
yeah, and
Um,
yeah,
and powerful.
yeah.
Yes, excellent, excellent. Dan, the other thing I just wanted to mention was one of your other reviews. I just want to get to this. I would be remiss if I did not include this one from Joseph Cannon, who said winter work vividly captures those first chaotic months after the Berlin Wall came down, with East Germany in free fall and the once feared Stasi officers running for cover in the hands of their former enemies. An entertaining thriller about a society turned upside down.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that. Let's talk about where you go from here. Are you going to talk? Do you know what you're going to write about next? Are you going to stay in these chaotic times? Are you going to stay in Berlin? I mean, where will we find your next book?
Right now, what I've started working on is a book set in and this is something I haven't done before. It's a fictional Eastern European country. It's a little bit like Hungary, a little bit like the Czech Republic. It's set in the present day, or pretty much the present day, let's say 2021. And I don't really want to talk about
Okay.
much else of it, but I'm trying some things I haven't done before, and that's going to be fun as well, I think.
Very cool. Because your days in you said in your bio that your days of covering the siege of Sarajevo led to your debut novel, Lie in the Dark. So it seems like there's something that really fascinates you about these, Eastern European countries and
Yeah,
the siege and the fall of communism and during turbulent political times.
yeah.
Certainly. Ripe for the ripe pickings here. If we have time, we did have one more comment submitted in advance. This person would like to know about your career as a journalist. Has it helped, hindered, or not impacted your career as a writer?
Oh, it's helped immensely, because as a journalist, you have to ask so many stupid questions, and you learn after a while that there is no such thing as a stupid question.
Mm.
Otherwise, you'll just continue to be ignorant, and it puts you. You also had to look at the world through so many different points of view of so many different people from all walks of life, all incomes, all races, and you had to empathize and empathize and empathize and see things from other people's point of view that wasn't your own. And that trains you to be a novelist as well as anything, that type of observation, that type of empathy for different points of view. So
I love that. And I feel like that empathy and that understanding and looking at life through other points of views could be helpful for all of us during these particularly
yeah,
turbulent times.
yeah.
Margaret saying Dan's pulling the Iron Curtain across the fictitious setting, as it were. LOL. She adds that a journalist in Baltimore, like one of her favorite authors, Alice Steinbach.
Oh yes, Alice was a friend of mine, and it was so sad she passed away a few years back. And Alice wrote a couple of lovely books. One about her experiences in Paris, and it's Alice was a very interesting woman who won a Pulitzer Prize for feature writing, and a very graceful writer. And I'm glad that you're aware of Alice's work. That's great.
Yay. And very cool to know that you not only knew her, but we're friends. We love hearing those little tidbits. Leslie joining us from Canada, giving us her signature Canadian hello and saying she's sorry she's late. Leslie, no worries. The replay will be up. And y'all, I want to remind you that the book is yours for the ordering. So be sure to click over and order it. So I'm going to put the link in the comments right here. So wherever you're watching from, be sure to click over and order it from our favorite woman-owned independent bookstore, Murder by the Book, so that you too can immerse yourself in this winter work where we have learned that Dan has earned starred reviews from everyone out there, from Booklist, from Kirkus, from PW. Congratulations on all of this. So here is the link. I'm going to pop it up right here. Grab it, click it, and order it so that you too can get your copy. Dan, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Sarah. It's been a pleasure.
Yay. We loved getting a peek into your process, into learning the backstory of Emil and the Stasi, and we will look forward to hopefully seeing you when you have your next work out.
Oh, thank you. I'd be happy to do that. Appreciate it.
All right, everybody, stay tuned. At the top of the hour, I will be back with David Bell. See you then.